Okay, so I think that we're live. Then I'm going to the channel for the chat. Okay. Okay, so this is a late live, but I was thinking about doing this video. I didn't know if I wanted to do it tonight or tomorrow, but he wanted to watch, what were we watching, babe?
When They See Us.
Yeah, so he wanted to watch that, and so he pulled it up on his computer, and we were watching it. And then I have a hard time, y'all, with passive experiences. So, like, about halfway into episode 2, I was like, my mind started to, like, you know, think of stuff, and I started thinking of submissiveness versus being a pick-me. And so I was like, babe, can we finish watching this later? And, what do you think of this video idea? So he didn't actually know what a pick-me was because, and I have to be honest, until I came to YouTube, I had never heard the term pick-me either. So I had to kind of explain to him what it was. But I wanted to talk about that. And then as we were discussing that, we got off onto some other subjects. And I always am so like, I love our conversation so much. And I was like, wait, we could have this conversation live. And then you guys could all partake in the conversation with me, because we started really just totally getting off topic. I think we were talking about like even child support and things like that. But let's start with the easiest thing first, right? Which is like being submissive versus being a pick-me. So the other day, because he was like, we kind of already spoke about this. The other day, you were kind of describing like different types of positionality that women can have. And one of the ones that you described is kind of like a pick-me, which is basically like a doormat. Is that, yeah. So, I think, okay, well, let me ask you, since I belong to you, would you consider me to be submissive?
Yes.
Okay, so I don't want to say that about myself. I think that's kind of like my nature, but I didn't want to say it about myself. So as a woman who does believe in submissiveness and is submissive, I find that a pick-me is a very different thing. And a pick-me, I think, is a dangerous position for a woman to play because I think it's devaluing. And submissiveness is not like being a pick-me. Babe, can you just go into like what you were saying the other day when you were talking about the different positionality of women? And like, have you experienced a woman like that in your life that was just kind of doormatish in her approach to dealing, or, very, pleasing past a point of like all reason?
Well, fortunately, I could say I've never experienced I think you're calling those women a pick me, like pick me, pick me, pick me.
Yeah, I think it's supposed to be like that.
Which is crazy. But it sounds like, kind of like a thirsty woman. Not necessarily going to call her a thought, but just thirsty, right? And just before, because whatever reason, whether it's her age or her dearth of physical attractiveness, or not having nice attributes or body, that makes her feel as though she has to placate men to the umpteenth degree. um so I, again, have had the good fortune of never you know coming across a pick me, pick me, pick me. Yeah, I think that could be dangerous, and it's definitely a huge distinction between a pick me and somebody who's submissive. Usually, when we're talking about a pick me, from the definition that you've conveyed, is somebody that, or a woman that has very low self esteem. right? And again, and I'm really not trying to be mean, but a lot of these women are easily persuaded and convinced to do things that are really not in their best interest and or nature. Hence that we have, and I'm not saying that these women will become prostitutes or anything like that, but I mean, it's kind of borderline, right? So they would do a lot of things that are just very questionable that a woman should be doing. But again, with their low self-esteem, they may feel this is the only way in which that they could get a man. So, so the short answer, no, I haven't. Um, yeah, I just have. Fortunately, I haven't had, you know, the experience of coming across a pick me. I'm pretty sure I know they exist, but again, yeah, uh, no, I'm cool.
I think like to use the word prostitute in a way that's not sexual, I would say that to me, pick me's prostitute out um, their being, right? Like even in conversation, they kind of pimp out their personality and it's very conformist. So I am very much like I like to please, like I take pleasure in like pleasing him, for example, right? So I like it when he feels I've done a good job. I like to do things for him. I actually get really irritable when he tries to do stuff for himself that I could do for him because I'm like, why wouldn't you want me to do it? Why can't I do it for you, right?
Yes,
I
very true. Like, no,
could,
I can do this. I got this. So,
yeah, but I like to do it for him. So there's one thing there's a difference between being agreeable and submissive and being an absolute doormat. Number one, it doesn't help the man. Let's just talk about like if your real goal is just you want to please a man, it doesn't help the man for you to be a complete doormat and to just go along with everything a man is saying. And, even if it's completely wrong, it doesn't help him,
well,
right?
superficially, it will help them, right? I mean, if you're just looking for to get your rocks off and just to always feel validated or empowered, so yeah, that may help the male ego, right? And definitely may help his libido, so I wouldn't say it's not going to help him, but I think I know what you're conveying. It's not going to make him a better man. It's not
Right,
going to be complimentary to him. It's not going
right.
to be a situation where it's iron sharpening iron. So I agree with that, but again, you have to. I would leave it up to the individual male. What's the definition of help? And again, a lot of us we think with our phallus, right? And we think that yes, if you're helping us, maintain, an erection or ejaculation or just soothing our ego, then you're helping us. And again, in a lot of ways, that is helping. But again, if it's just relegated to that, then I agree with you. That kind of help is very myopic.
Yeah, and I think like even in situations where let's say a pick me is not in a relationship, but let's say in a position where she's dealing with like a lot of men, that was my positionality is if you really love or care about a person, you want to see them at their best. So watching a person not be at their best and just because you want to be pleasing, you simply just pretend like they're at their best and nothing is wrong, I think will make your life miserable and it won't allow them to grow as a person. Like neither of you is going to grow that way. And I think also the man does not really respect you. Like a man will pander to a woman who kisses his butt. And men in the chat, maybe you guys can attest to this. Like you have a woman that if you call her in the middle of the night or if you say anything, she kind of goes along with it. But that's not a woman that you respect, right? It's a woman you'll deal with because it's profitable to deal with her because you know what to expect. You can expect a yes, but there's no actual respect there. And I think when you are a submissive woman, you don't always have to say yes. You don't always have to say yes, and you don't have to like not have a mind of your own, or not be challenging to the person you're talking to, or to your partner. And I don't mean that in a negative way. Like, he and I were having a conversation regarding child support earlier, and I was using the example of a woman that came off very pick-me-ish to me, and I gave an example of a conversation and her talking points with regard to child support. And he and we actually disagree on this topic, because we were getting into the liability and who has ultimate control, and equity and fairness with regard to pregnancy, child support, abortion, and all of that, right? And we were on disagreeing sides, but obviously I love him. I'm still in submission to him, right? You can never have that conversation with a pick me, because the conversation is going to go something like this. The man says something and she goes, "You're absolutely right." End of conversation. There's nothing there's nothing stimulating about that. Not unless he's trying to look good in front of other people and it's beneficial for you to just agree with him.
Yeah, I definitely believe that there's situational, if we could invent a term, pick me situations, right? Where it is definitely good to go ahead and to do that, right? Of course we have egos, right? So again, you don't want to bash the male ego, especially in front of, publicly, right? So, no one wants to do that. And again, at the same time, no one wants to do it to the female ego, right? So it definitely is a bi-directional dynamic. Um, but yeah, I concur. I definitely think, it's really like a coming to.
Okay, I think something happened to his computer. Hold on, let me check with him. Okay, well, he gets it together, because we're not on the same device. Oh,
Okay.
babe? Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
It's okay, don't worry about it.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to pause for the call for a few.
Okay, go ahead.
But I think it's like, analogous to Coming to America, with Eddie Murphy, where he was telling her to hop on one foot and bark like a dog. And so to me, I see these pygmies just doing that very same thing, just doing whatever is asked of them. And again, obedience is not a bad thing, but it's just the way in which they're doing it and the reason they're doing it for. You know what I mean? It's just to be picked. And it's not to really be complimentary. It's not to be part of a partnership or anything like that, or to grow. It's just for the pure satisfaction of being picked. And that's really dangerous.
Yeah. Are you gonna run and go do that really quick?
Yeah, I'm gonna run. So
okay. He'll be back in just a second. He's got something to do. But I'm gonna just go into this like a little bit more while he takes care of what he has to take care of, just like with regard to the difference between submissiveness and a pick me. And I'm gonna go ahead and just put it in the scope of like being here on YouTube. And my man has already said it. I'm submissive. Like, I'm very submissive in real life. I'm not on YouTube talking about I believe in submission, and that's like not how I am in my household. I'm extremely submissive to my man. But with that said, I find that here on YouTube, men often believe submissiveness looks something like I can act any type of way towards you, and because I'm a man, you fall back, right? And then if you challenge them, if you disagree with them, if let's say we're on a panel together, like in my case, which means that we are peers, right? I'm not in a submissive position to you when we're doing our jobs or when we're in a peer discussion, right? Then they feel like you should fall back. And then if you do any challenging of them, or if you don't allow yourself to be a doormat, then you're not truly submissive. A pick me in that situation will obviously acquiesce to that. Number one, because men who are not like natural leaders or haven't been taught to lead, often they think aggression is a form of masculinity and leadership, right? And so the more flamboyant you are, the more aggressive you are, the bigger you're, demonstrating your manhood, right? But we're not peacocks. So that's not a demonstration of manhood, in my opinion. And so, submissiveness is not about never being able, and my man said this the other day, and he can embellish on it when he comes back. But being submissive is not being weak, right? A submissive woman is a strong woman who is under the leadership of somebody who is stronger than her. That's all that is. It's not being a doormat. It's not yes mamming everything. It's none of those things. And it also doesn't mean that your positionality with all men should equal your positionality with your man. It also doesn't mean that even if you're in a relationship and you're being treated badly, that you have to accept that. Or if you're in a social dynamic and there is inappropriate behavior going on there, that you have to accept that, lest your submissiveness and womanhood be in question. And I think pick me's, and my man said it best, it's a sign of having low self-esteem. Low self-esteem. The other day when I was on Nyla's panel, I was telling the women, like, you don't have to be the most attractive woman. You don't have to think like you don't have value or your marketplace value is low. Like, you're not literally a piece of spoiled meat. You know what I mean? That's inedible, because there's a man for every woman. Every woman doesn't have to be a 10. Every woman doesn't have to be perfect to have an expectation to be treated well and to be loved, right? A pick me does not feel they're worthy of that. So a pick me is going to feel that they should be willing to accept less because their worth is less. Submissiveness and being a pick me are not equivalent. It's not equivalent. And that's why when I did this, I was going to do this live on my own, but I wanted to have him here because he's in leadership over me, and he's not going to be like BSing on the topic. And so I thought it would be good to have it like where we were both here and having this conversation.
I'm here.
Okay, babe. I was saying that I was talking about, I don't know if you heard it, but I was talking about how, like, I am submissive, right, to you, but that being submissive doesn't mean being a doormat, and that if you're in a social situation or even a relationship where you're being mistreated, you don't have to be acquiescent or not speak up for yourself. Or if you're among peers, do you know what I mean? You don't have to engage in regular peer conversation and just suddenly be a doormat and suddenly allow yourself to be mistreated just because you are submissive and your submission is going to be called into question. And in the same breath, you don't want to be a pick me and have such low self-esteem for yourself that you don't feel you're worthy of better treatment, that you don't feel that you can have standards because you're not valuable as a person. And I think, to me, being a pick me comes off as, like, kind of like you were saying earlier, just having low self-esteem. And if we don't have self-love, then how are we going to have the expectation that anybody else love or respect us?
Well, see, that's exactly right. That's the point. So, like in those situations and everything. So, if you're a pick me, then you're not going to be valued, the same as a submissive or anyone else for that matter. You're just not. So they're going to treat you in this doormat type of way, and whatever type of treatment you receive, it is what it is, and that's just it. And so your feelings don't matter because you made it abundantly clear that it's not about your own feelings. It's about, placating, satisfying this man. So again, you know, everything's on the table, and at the same thing, everything's kind of off the table as far as your self-respect.
Yeah, like I totally agree with that. But I think I don't know if I have like much to add to that. It's like just a word of caution. Do you know what I mean? It is literally just a word of caution that being submissive is not being a doormat. Like it's absolutely not. And I'm gonna tell you guys, I'm really submissive. And I'm submissive to a fault. I'm very forgiving of people, and not just in like intimate relationships, like in reference to him, right? But just like in real life, I am just a, you know, I'm not a confrontational person. I'm like, if somebody does something, I'm very easy to forgive people and think, and he's even lectured me on this. He's been like, okay, like, you don't have to, you know what I mean? Be that forgiving all the time. Like it's, you can have a line here. Um, but you have to, no matter how sweet you are, no matter how submissive you are, you have to have a standard and you have to know that there is a line there, right? There's a line between being a respectable, submissive woman, which, as he just said, is valuable. Submissiveness is so valuable to men, right? But being a doormat can make you usable to men. So let's make let's make the separate the separation. Submissiveness is valuable. Being a pick me is usable. Do you want to be a valuable woman or a usable woman? Right? You can be used for a purpose. You can be used for validation. You can be used and pulled out the box when you need somebody to nod their head and say yes. You can be used when somebody desires something versus valuable, where you're something that is treasured and desired to be kept because there's a value to you. And I would say that is the biggest difference between being submissive and being a pick me. Are you a valuable woman or are you a usable woman? And that's where I would leave that. I don't know, babe, did you have any final thoughts on that or?
No, that I mean, I think you've done a really good job of encapsulating the distinction between the two. Again, like I alluded to earlier, it's just a very dangerous pick me situation for women to put them place themselves in. And I'm certain to some degree that we have some pick me brothers who are just so thirsty and they'll just do. And that situation is kind of difficult and hard to really explain because you know within the fabric of society, I mean, men are supposed to be really, we're really supposed to be doing what the woman wants us to do, right? And again, we're not considered submissive, but that's how that game really works. I mean, because really, the way the submissive game plays out is that yes, the woman is submissive and everything, and she's doing what pleases us. At the same time, that submissive nature of the woman really allows her to get a lot of things that she wants as well. So,
That's true.
I mean, so let's keep it a buck here. I mean, that's how that's played out. I mean, so when we're talking about a pick me man, it's kind of difficult. You know what I mean? Because you know the rules of society dictates that you are supposed to be doing these things. You know, for a woman. But automaticity anyway. But again, these brothers, I feel, they're just extra thirsty. I mean, they go over and beyond. I mean, they're Captain Sailor. I'm not gonna call a female a guard to
Oh,
her,
pick me,
but
man.
but you know, those brothers and some of those sisters probably listen. They know exactly who I'm talking about. I mean, they're just like just all up on the sister. I mean, again, and not saying that they're being harassing or anything like that, but you know, you could call him to do anything, and he's just like that, that really good dog. You know what I mean? That puppy that's always there, like, here, boy, come here, boy, and he's right there with his tongue out, and it's like, come on now, and he knows, and you could call him. He's gonna do whatever you want him to do because he may be, butt hurt ugly. You know what I mean? He, may have a couple teeth jacked up or whatever situation is, but he may have, a good financial situation or whatever the case may be. But unfortunately, and well, again, unfortunately, both sides of the gender spectrum, we have pick me people. But again, I think, unfortunately, pick me females are a lot more prevalent.
Yeah, I guess I didn't even think about that about men that are pick me's. I've definitely met men that are pick me's. I've definitely met men. I've literally known a man who told me that he would basically do anything I asked him to. And I'm not, babe, can I tell this story? Is it gonna be okay? Um, I was like, I was dumbfounded. So I was like, well, lick my toe. And y'all, he licked my toe. And I was like, this mess is crazy. And for a while that was very fascinating, but I had no respect for him as a person. You just don't win if you're a pick me. I think you win even less if you're a man, right?
Yeah,
Because right? Because being a pick me if you're a woman can be mistaken for submission at first. A pick me might slide under the radar a little bit because that could be mistaken for submission by somebody who doesn't know any better. But if a man does it, I think it's just like detrimental. There's just no mistaking that. It's just not a good position for a man to be in. It's wonderful to be sweet. I would say that he is very sweet and loving, but he's also firm and a leader, right? If you're all sugar and you're a man, then, you're not going to be treated well. You're only going to be taken advantage of. And that's how we get our incels and our MGTOW and all that, because you got the sweetness down, and women do appreciate sweetness, but you don't have the leadership and knowing when to say no and putting your foot down and not just being a puddle every time, the woman shows up. You can't live your life as a puddle if you're a man. I think that's detrimental, more so than it is to women. But either way, I think just being a pick me is just a bad idea. Again, that the same rule applies to male pick me's as I said for female pick me's. Valuable versus usable. Because when you're only usable, you're going to get used up and discarded, right? So you want to be valuable. So, baby, let's talk about like the child support and like the equity and fairness with regard to like pregnancy and stuff like that, because he actually agrees with a lot of these guys on YouTube. What were you saying like your positionality was like with regard to the level of control women have over that situation?
well, I mean, up until recent, as if we're talking about birth control, outside of condoms, right? But the majority of the birth control, because it was easier, right? You know, was on the woman. Now, again, it takes two to tango. So I'm not saying that, you know, the woman gets pregnant because no, unless, there's some artificial insemination going on or some stealing of the sperm, which happens rarely, right? Um, Again, it takes two to, procreate. So my argument was that women have the power to make that decision unilaterally. So say if she becomes impregnated, right, and unbeknownst to her partner, she could choose to terminate that pregnancy, unilaterally. There's oftentimes, well, I'll say way more than not, that her partner is not going to be able to convince her to have the child. And again, I know a lot of feminists will say, "Oh, well, she should be, she this is her body and everything. She has control over it." But again, those two both enter into that sexual act, which is an agreement, right? And so, which is a procreation, which is a procreative agreement. So, with both of you knowing that, there's a good chance of that occurring. And so, if it occurs, there should be some, some equal, there should be some resolution that both of the partners agree with. Now, again, I know it's going to be the male's not going to be carrying around, you know, the the child for 9 months.
Oh, you're
I
a
get it.
cheater. No, he's
No,
cheating because he knows
no,
my
I know
talking
that.
points. He's
But
rebuffing my talking points before I make them because he already knows what I'm gonna say. You cheater.
no, but let me finish this. Let me finish this. So when my ex-wife was pregnant with our son, again, I didn't carry, you know, our son around, right? On my, inside me, on my person. But again, I often say, and again, people may have, feel a certain way about this when I say, no, we're pregnant. And again, I don't mean that in a way to, to um, dismiss or to belittle, because I can't even fathom, you know, the physical dynamics and everything that goes into that. Again, I'm not saying that, but what I'm saying, we as the partner, as the father in this journey, there's certain obligations and everything that I am supposed to do to help her through, help ease or reduce some of these physical things, at least as much as I can do. So again, whether that's Lamaze, whether it's there getting up in the middle of the night, going to get ice, whatever the situation is, whether it's massaging, whatever that situation is, that's what I mean by it's we. So it's not a situation where she just got that child. That's all on her. I ain't tripping off of it. You know what I mean? So no, there's certain things that the partner, that the man can do. And again, I'm not equating into, because it's a fault. I'm not saying it's equivalent to carrying a baby around for 9 months or more. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that the male, we as a partner, we do have things that we could do, to help, because it should be a partnership, right? And so that's what I'm saying
Mhm.
about that. But oftentimes, males, we don't get the chance to have a say in that process, one way or the other. And with that being said, if she decides to have it, let's say again, because, and I would agree with Irene, most males would end up saying, like, okay, if
But
she,
you can't agree with me. I haven't stated my point yet. You see how he's
well,
outing
this is
himself?
off air. She,
No, you see how he's outing himself?
well, I'm keeping it a buck.
I knew.
So,
I told you guys he knew my talking points, and so he's talking to my talking points. See, he's agreeing with stuff I haven't even said yet. I haven't even had my chance yet.
well,
I
you
called
said
you a
that most
cheater.
men probably wouldn't argue with a woman having an abortion, and some, I would tend to agree with that. I'm saying what you said, and I'm saying I agree with that. So I'm not stealing anything. All right, let's just keep it real here.
Wow.
But I am saying that
I'm sleeping with the enemy, y'all. He knows
oftentimes,
my secrets.
that option is not given, but the option of paying child support is given, and there's no choice. So again, it seems like either, you know it's just there's just no equity here, because I'm not saying things are going to be equal, because that's crazy, but there's no equity here. So, Irene.
Okay, well, keep in mind as I speak that he purposely spoke to all the points he knew I was going to make, which is just wrong. But this is what I will say too, like with regard to it. But before I respond, I just want to ask you a quick question.
Yes.
I'm scared to ask you though. I'm asking this for Dark Prophet. He's younger, so he is, and you're in college right now, Dark Prophet. You're not in graduate school. He's in college. He's in his 20s. He's one of my mods, and when we were talking about pick me's and all that, he said, I'm not quite sure where the line is for a pick me. A lot of Black women that have had interest in me make no sort of effort to make this known. So I think I have the opposite problem. And I told him that he has to let his interest be known, but that I would ask you what you thought. So before I give my viewpoint on child support and abortion and pregnancy and liability and all that, would you mind addressing that, or do you agree with me? He's probably not going to completely agree with me because I know him, But do you agree with me that he has to let what he's what he wants and the woman that he's interested in know that he wants her versus waiting for them to kind of give him signals?
So I'm trying to understand the question correctly. So he's considering himself to be a male pick me. Is that
No, I don't think he's considering himself to be a male pick me. I think he sort of um he's talking about like maybe is it a pick me attitude if a woman comes to him and lets them know that he wants them. And I'm telling him he has to approach the woman. Like, don't sit around and wait for women to
so?
like
So they're
give you
approaching
signs.
him. Is that
They're
what?
not approaching him. So he's sitting waiting for a sign from women that
Oh,
they
okay.
like him. And I'm telling him he needs to be the initiator. What do you think?
Yeah, and so the brother's younger and everything, and that's so his trepidation is not something that I would blame him for because we're in a current society where you know if a guy, a heterosexual guy is going to do something, you know, that tries to get to know um, a woman better, I mean, he could be labeled something egregiously, right? He could be harassing her, stalking her, or anything like that. I mean, and it's just so I understand his trepidation, but at the same time, I understand where you're coming from, Irene. He has to kind of let them know, like, hey, there's some interest there. Again, it's just crazy now. I mean, it's almost like in these times you have to have like an agreement. I mean, something like written out, like, hey, I'm I just think you're attractive or whatever the case may be. These are some of my interests. Would you like to whoop you womb or whatever? But you almost have to have it written out to like, hey, I'm just doing this. Just see, I'm not trying to stalk you. I'm not trying to rape you or do anything like that because again, and I'm not trying to dismiss, women who have been, victims, so on and so forth. But in this current era within the Me Too movement, you really have to be careful and cautious of the ways in which you approach women. I mean, it's unfortunately it's just that scary, and so yeah, I would say just do it with caution, but definitely do it. But just make sure that it's clear that you're not a creep. You're not this thirsty guy. You're not a pick me guy. You're not any of those things. You're just like, hey, these are my interests. What are yours? Maybe we could indulge in a conversation or what have you, or see where this goes. But I definitely think he should take your advice, but I would just suggest that he definitely do it with caution.
I would say be friends first. Don't just approach a woman purely like on interest. Like you don't want to get friend zoned, but you also like part of the vetting process is like not immediately jumping into like, oh, I have a romantic interest in you. Like you can know you're attracted to somebody, but to have a romantic interest, I think you should separate having a romantic interest in somebody from being sexually attracted to somebody. And so get to know that person first because you could waste a lot of time and get into like a crazy situation if you aren't having any like conversations and stuff first. But to get back to what I was saying, I think that men should be able to stop a woman from getting an abortion. I don't think men should be able to allow or force a woman to get an abortion. I think that that although women have more control over the situation, I think it's weird for men to want equality when it comes to pregnancy, right? Because there's no equality in pregnancy. This is why he spoke to this point, because he knew I was going to make this point. Pregnancy doesn't mean the same thing for men as it does for women, right? Women literally have a human being in their bodies, their organs get pushed out the way, they get fat, they lose their balance. Do you know what I mean? Their bodies are ravaged, then that child has to exit their body. Like it's a whole thing that's unequal, right? In pregnancy. So it's like laughable to me this in this generation of like, we all want equality. Like, you know what? It's not equal. Everything cannot be made equal. That's a fantasy. This is the real world. In the real world, only so much is going to be equal. There's like a whole lot of stuff that's simply not going to be equal because it just doesn't make sense. It's simply not possible. And all the whining and complaining in the world's not going to make it possible. So I feel like, with that said, with the understanding that whilst I may think men should have the right to prevent women from getting abortions and things like that, men, you have to recognize at that point, and women also have to recognize this too, when you decide to have intercourse with somebody, you're essentially saying, you are worth the risk of me knocking you up. You are worth the risk of me getting you pregnant. And especially if you're a man and you're in a position where that baby's not going to be in your body, and the laws are made to pander to the person who has to carry a human being inside of them and not the person who doesn't have to do that, then you want to be very careful, because your choice, that's your biggest and most powerful choice, is to put your semen in a position where it can fertilize an egg. And then once that is done, then everything after that is what, in fancy Latin terms, we like to call a consequence. So there are actions and then there are consequences. And so I think that a lot of people want to gloss over that. So I feel that, in those cases, then you kind of eat whatever happens after that. Both the man and the woman, they kind of eat what happens after that. And so even with sperm stealing, let's say if like men have their sperm stolen, like it's got to come out your penis to get stolen. Now, I'm not advocating sperm stealing. I'm just saying that the only foolproof way to prevent this pregnancy is for women not to have sex with men and men to not be having sex with women that they don't want to run the risk of having offspring with. And I know that's not fun though, right? That's like a buzzkill, because that means that you're not going to be able to, pander to your lust. But it's really the only way, because after that, we're just talking about playing damage control. I mean, that's really what it is in real life, right? After you have sex and things go wrong, then you're trying to play damage control, whether that's damage control for a baby, damage control for a sexually transmitted infection, damage control, you know what I mean, for whatever it is. And so I think that just comes with like responsibility and things like that. And that would be where I personally stand on that. Well, I'm glad you agree with me with B1 for life, because honestly, I find that I get a lot of pushback with regard to that here on YouTube. Like whenever I go to the manosphere, they literally go crazy when I say that. They like literally lose their whole minds. Babe,
Yes.
what did you think?
No, I mean, so I think we pretty much come to the same conclusion. I said equity and not equitable. I mean, not equal, right? So again, that's that. Of course, you know what the definition is. Given the individual person what they need in order to be successful, and not giving individuals the exact same thing. So I concur, because with the woman, um, definitely is going to need, especially having a human inside her. It's not going to be the same thing the male needs. You know what I mean? So I agree with that, but again, I there should be some type of resolution that is made, um, because, like you alluded to, there's definitely power given. Again, and whether you agree rightfully or wrongly so, again, we all could agree that the woman has the majority of that power in that situation. Um, and I'll give you another example what I mean by power, and this is along the same line. So we know about. So we were talking about um, child support, right? And of course, you know, a brother should be accountable, and they definitely should, you know, pay child support, or they definitely should be, within that child's life, however that looks, right? They should be participatory at some level, whether it's economically or whether it's just, their, split parenting, whatever the parenting dynamic is, there should be some involvement with both parties. I wholeheartedly agree with that. But here's what I mean by the power that a lot of women have, and we were talking about
Okay. Tell me about it.
when I'm talking about child support. And
Okay.
so, and a lot of people don't know this, right? So let's say there's, a man, he's dating a woman, right? And she has, biological children from whether it was a former partner or past marriage, so on and so forth, right? So they enter in this relationship, they move in together, whatever the case is, right? That man, after 6 months, is, regardless if they entered in an agreement where they says, hey, you're going to be financially obligated to these kids that are not biologically his, and this is prior to them, getting married or anything like that. After 6 months, that man has a financial responsibility to those children.
According to what law? Where did you hear that?
Look up in lactose parentis.
Okay.
And I'm not talking about that one in education, but in lactose parentis, if I believe it's 6 to 8 months, and if because of course that man is going to be there in the role of
I
the
don't I
father.
don't I don't see this.
That's okay. You can look it up. I mean, I'm not making this up.
I'm looking at it.
So there's two definitions for lactose parentis. It's one where it's in the school where the educator takes the place of the parent. So we're
But
really
like
kind of being
what law? What law is this?
just look up the definition.
The only law that I see regarding this is for students.
No, there's two. So a lot of people don't know about this one, but it does exist.
A foster parent.
No, not a foster parent. It could be a male that's dating a woman, and she has children, not his biological children. It's
Mm,
rare. It's very rare. But
I see instead of a parent or in place of a parent, a foster parent, a county custodial agency, or a boarding school, which is assuming the parental obligations for the minor. I don't see anything about like live-in situations.
well, it extends to that. Trust me. So I'll maybe have to get you the some more definition.
I think it's a state by state thing because it says some states allow persons who stand in lacto parentis to a child to have visitation rights. So, but this is going to be like a state by state thing.
Well, I mean, regardless of the state by state thing, it's still giving. Again, in the example that I was sharing with you, the woman wasn't even trying to exercise that power. She wasn't even. She was like, "Listen, hey, no, we were dating everything. It didn't work out, whatever." And but again, he was in that role, right? And so they were like, therefore, he'd pay.
No, you can't be telling these trifling women about that.
Well, again, I'm just keeping it a buck. I mean, we're on your show and everything, so this is the power. You know what I mean? So when we're talking about this,
But that power goes both ways because that could be like a man too that has a child. It's not like a law that only applies to men though. So let's
you
be
know,
fair.
I'll give
And
you the nigger list right
earlier,
now.
no,
You
don't try
know,
to because earlier you were like, many men in the Black community are single fathers. I see them all the time. So don't try to make it like
No, no, that is true. That
so
is
then
true.
it can apply to women too for all these single fathers that you say.
But in our society, that's just like the conversation we were having, I think this week
Oh, there's
about
peanut butter.
rape. About rape. They don't look. I mean, even in the definition, we're talking about male forced. You were even laughing. I'm not. I shouldn't say that online, but you like, come on. How is somebody gonna look at little me and big old you and say she forced me to rape her? You were busting out laughing
I
hysterically.
was hysterical, y'all. I
And
talked about
so,
this on Sonetter's platform too, but I was hysterical, y'all. I was
and,
cracking up because I
and
thought it was
so,
so funny.
and so, you know, these things happen within our society, and again, this is how they're looked upon. So I say all to say this: if a man was put in that situation where lactose and lactose parentis could have been able to benefit him, they'd have looked at him like, really, really, she was with you for 6 months, and now you're trying to get her for some money for your kids that you have that you ain't probably take care. I mean, listen, you know how that narrative would have been played out. So don't even go there and try to switch it up just because I said there are some single
No, you were
fathers
trying
out
to make
there.
it like there was like this huge amount because y'all, we were talking about child support and we were talking about like fatherless homes in the Black community and the study that says that Black men are the most active and da da da. And the thing is that he has a mentoring agency and he's worked with Black boys for many years. And he's also an educator. So I was asking him, like, in your real, like, because you're around kids all the time, like, this is what you do, right? Black kids are what you do for a living. Can you tell me that that is definitely the case? Because he's around Black youth all the time, every single day. And he was trying to make it like there's this high concentration of single Black fathers around. And that's why I'm calling him on that because
No, okay, let's get my words straight. I said they do exist. I
play it
said
down.
there's more single mothers, and
Nah,
I said no.
you
I,
only get that after I pushed you for it.
no, you know, but I mean, you make it out to make it seem as if these men are dinosaurs. I mean, like, or unicorns,
They
or just
kind
like
of
they
are,
don't
though.
exist. You know, they do, but again, they go on the radar. They're not trying to, they can't get any support if they wanted it because again, they're men. And so people look at, well, you're a man, you should be able to do this and that, and which they should in a lot of cases. But when we talk about, Black men, you know, that same type of patriarchal lens that you place on all males, it often just doesn't fit.
Okay, so I want to go back to the in lactose parentis thing, right? I'm going to go for California law. It's not 6 months in California, it's 7 years in California. So, for example, in California, you also have to file for it. It doesn't happen automatically. But after 7 years, um, of a person serving as a child's primary custodian, they can file for custody of the child under that law. So this is like a state by state thing. So he said 6 months. That's like, this is a state by state thing. And in the state of California, it's not something that automatically happens. And I just use California for an example. It's something you have to ask the court for, and it's a 7-year period. So I think maybe there's some states where it's 6 months, but just looking just at this one state, it's 7 years. That's like a far cry from 6 months. And so I don't want people to go into a panic, but I am going to go ahead and do a live on just this particular law and give some state examples, because outside of fear mongering men or women from, in that sense of being worried that they're going to become liable for children that aren't biologically theirs, this could also be used to our advantage. So if you know a child that's being abused in the home, if you know a child whose parent has deserted them, things like that, sometimes when parents are having trouble, they might leave their child with a family member or a friend. if your state has a law that's not as long as 7 years, right? Because very few parents are going to disappear for 7 years. These sort of laws can also be used as protective for children, right? It also could be if you do have a partner and you guys are not married, or you guys are married, and the child is in your home and something happens to your wife or your partner or your husband, and you feel that the best place for the child to be is to remain with you because the other parent is absent or the other parent is unfit, then I think these laws can be used for good as well. But I just want to say again, in the state of California, it's not 6 months, it is 7 years, which is a big difference. But the law does exist, but it's not, at least in California, it's not an automatic thing. You still do have to go to the court and petition the court for it. But that's fascinating. I didn't know about that law, babe.
Yeah. But as I was listening to you, even with that, I mean, definitely, as you conveyed that, um, there's some benefits to it. There's some benefits to it when we talk about it in the educational context as well. But so I would hope, again, there's still this prejudice out there, unfortunately. If there was a case where there was a debilitating situation with the female, with the woman, right, and the male said, hey, if there was like some neglect or drug usage or something like that. I'm thinking about the movie When a Man Loves a Woman. If you haven't seen that movie, it's a really good movie. I forget her name, the actress is in it, but she was an alcoholic. You know what I mean? And she just couldn't get off she couldn't get off the juice. And her husband was a pilot, and I believe they had a kid and everything, and she was just neglectful and everything because she was an alcoholic. And he I believe he stuck in there with her and everything, but uh, I think he did leave her for some time and everything. My point in sharing all is that it's difficult, again, oftentimes when there is a man, especially if there's not a substance situation, right? If there's not an alcohol or neglect or abuse, or if you're just trying to say, hey, I'm the better, well-rounded parent, and it'd be better if child goes with me for whatever argument that you're trying to make, it's going to be difficult. But it's definitely a good thing. So it's holistic, but again, it can be used to get some brothers. So just be mindful.
Yeah. Well, then I would say if you're going to be mindful of the laws in your state. And I think
Absolutely.
that's important. But also, I would say this, if you don't want to be a stepfather or a stepmother to a child, don't live with somebody that has a child. I think that's also important too.
Well,
So we
don't call him a stepfather or a stepmother because those are things to get stepped on. Now, you're not the biological father and everything. I just don't like that term. I mean, it just kind of bothers me because you're essentially playing in that role as an extended mother, father, and everything. Again, I never you never could replace the biological parent, and you shouldn't be in a competition with them. But again, I know the technical term is step, but no, those are things you step on. You don't step on your parents, and these are still parents. So, and that's just a little pet peeve of mine. I don't know. I'm a words guy, but anyway.
Okay, so with regard to like child support and things like that, I think like children need parents to take care of them from both sides. And actually, somebody asked me about this and I actually spoke on this, but I don't think I asked you what you thought. I think you know what I think on this though. What about child support starting like from the time the woman is pregnant and a paternity test can be done, which is basically around 8 weeks? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think so. Child support varies. You know what I mean? So I think when we just hear child support, we first just immediately think about a check. You know what I mean? This Negro better cut me this amount of money because I'm about to have this baby. And to me, that doesn't fully capture what child support is. You know what I mean? So when I gave my examples earlier about my ex-wife and everything, and when I said that we were pregnant, to me, that's what child support means. Because oftentimes, the male or the brother or whomever it is, cutting a check is the least of their worries oftentimes. And sometimes it's very difficult, for some brothers to cut a check because they just can't do it or whatever their financial situation is. I'm not caping for them. I'm not making excuses for them, but it's just a reality for some brothers.
Wait, we're talking about during the pregnancy, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I'm talking about during the pregnancy. So again, so what is the definition of child support? You know what I mean? So again, I think a lot of times when we hear that, we just think of cutting a
Wait,
check.
you said can't afford it?
Yes.
Okay, so this will be my question, right? When people say they can't afford child support, be they male or female, my thing is this: the custodial parent doesn't get that option to not be able to afford to care for the child, right?
Yes. Yes.
Well, if the custodial parent doesn't get that option, how can the non-custodial parent get that option?
Well, I think it goes both ways. Again, so when we're talking about once, and this is what it goes back to the power, right? So once you engage in this procreative act, again, you all need to be, again, it's a procreative act. But if you're saying, hey, nah, I'm not good with this, and the other person say, yeah, I want to do this, and they're giving you reason why, and the other one saying, well, it is what it is, you know, and they're saying like, okay, it may be a struggle. Again, I'm not saying that as an excuse, but I'm saying these are some of the conversations that I know people have had in their reason or positionality for wanting to abort or to have a child. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so there's situations where we're talking about criminality. We're talking about, and again, people say, "Oh, well, you got to be careful who you lay down with," which is true, you know. But what if the person is not able to be gainfully employed? And I know some people, women, will be like, "Well, shoot, why you laying down with a broke Negro?" I mean, but it happens all the time. Let's be real. And sometimes you get pregnant, you get a broke a female pregnant. I mean, it goes both ways. And so I'm not saying that it shouldn't be paid, but I'm saying that it's often difficult. When you look at what is it called? That's not called the decimeter or whatever it is in California. I forget the term for it, but yeah, though it could be very expensive, you know. But I'm not saying it's not expensive for the you know, the what you call a parent, the custodial parent, to do all the things they have to do as well. But I'm saying that sometimes it just can't be the amount. So there has to be other things that needs to be considered, like, okay, maybe you can't cut, whatever is the amount of the check that, the state has determined you pay, but maybe you could, if you do have a job, maybe you have them on your, insurance, and maybe you're able to give us another amount, and maybe you're able to do certain other things. And again, I think there should be just some type of, you know, you know, just being amicable about the whole situation instead of just, depending on this number, this figure. Because let's keep it real, we know this happens a lot. And again, I'm not dismissing or caping for brothers who are not accountable, but we know some women just utilize the baby as a check, and they utilize the baby as a way in which to get back at the mate, for whatever reason, whether they didn't want to be with them or they moved on with somebody else, whatever the situation may be. We all know that ugly situation happens, and it doesn't do anything for the good of the baby. So what I'm saying is that there should be some support, but the support shouldn't just be drawn out by the state. I think the individual should have an honest, if they're, if they're mature enough, sit down and say, hey, this is what I could do. You know what I mean? This is what I could do consistently. And then once that, whatever those negotiations are, that person has to be consistent with what they could do. And I think that situation is better than having, the state just regulate, the amount of money that should be, issued out. Because again, oftentimes that money is not, it's not sufficient as somebody being present. You know what I mean? And so that's what I mean by that.
I think that, and Miss Red said this in the chat, and I completely agree with her, that with regard to child support, that starts when the woman is still pregnant. So within the 8th week of her actual pregnancy. I think that is something that makes sense if the father has the right to, if fathers have the right to say they don't want an abortion. And I would also add to that, if fathers have the right to, if they don't want the woman to get an abortion and she does want one, obviously the baby then has to live, because both parties would have to agree that the father can take custody of that child. So I think that, I honestly feel like that's about as far as like fathers' rights can go. I don't think it can really go any further, but I think that's the best we can do for men, given the fact that they're not carrying the child, which would be. And now let me be very clear. I completely disagree with abortion. I feel it should just be completely outlawed and nobody should have the option. I think we would have a lot less rogue pregnancies if you couldn't get out of it. I feel like, when you know that there's an out, people are more careless. And so I don't agree with abortion, but I don't think it's going to be outlawed. So since I don't think it's going to be outlawed, if abortion is going to be on the table, I feel the father should be able to veto an abortion. Ask a Classy Black Man was saying that women can give up custody of children without the father's consent. I have not heard that. I think the only way that a mother can give up custody of a child without the father's consent is if they can't find the father, because adoption agencies have strict regulations, and states have pretty strict regulations. If the woman claims she doesn't know who the father is, they have to make an attempt to find the father. If she says she does know who the father is, but she's not aware of where the father is, then they have to post like in a local paper for like a certain period of time in a visible place, so that hopefully the father can see. But I would say that for men, this is a dangerous thing, because you don't know if you've gotten a woman pregnant, especially if that's not your woman, right? And you're not seeing her on a regular basis and things like that, or you're not married to her. So this is all like cautionary, I think, more for men who care about their offspring and what happens to their seed, that they recognize that that's the risk you take during sex. You risk getting a woman pregnant, not knowing, and her giving your baby away. You risk a woman getting pregnant and going and killing your baby. You risk a woman being pregnant and then having your baby, and then you're going to have to raise a baby with this woman. So that's like a high risk for men, because so much is out of your control, not because the laws are unfair per se, but because literally you're not the one who's pregnant, right? You don't even know that you've gotten somebody pregnant unless the woman tells you. You just aren't going to know, because biologically it's just not possible without the woman sharing the information with you. So I think that's just a reality of the fact that men and women aren't the same. Now, with regard to child support and all that, I really have like little sympathy for poor people, be they men or women, who have children. Like at the end of the day, poor or not, you're going to have to take care of the child. And honestly, if you're so poor that you're not eating, maybe we could have a conversation. But if you're still clothed and eating, then you can cut your portion and give to the child, right? That's ultimately what has to happen. If there's one piece of chicken in the house and it's you and a kid in the house, guess who gets the chicken and guess who gets to go without food? And I think that's just the responsibility of being a parent. And if we make it real like that, I think people will make better choices. I think sometimes with all of these outs and the ability to be comfortable and all of that, then people are very irresponsible with themselves. And with that irresponsibility comes bad decisions. And so, yeah.
I don't disagree with that. I just think that sometimes when we have, the states and the courts, get involved and they become the mediator, instead of two amicable, mature, you know, co-parents, and I think that's problematic because I think, you know, within that situation, I think those two individuals could come up with the best resolution for the child. It's going to work out, best for them, individually, and most importantly, collectively, and what's in the best interest for the child. And again, what could be done on a consistent basis. And I say that because again, we have, these courts issuing out child support, you know, to these brothers and everything. And some are trying and some are not. Let's just keep it a buck. And some are not making those sacrifices like you just alluded to. Let's just keep it a buck, right? But again, I think when you have that, I think it creates more, you know, animosity, more hostility towards each other, and where again you could be working in such an amicable manner, even though you're not, in that situation where you are in a partnership, right? And you're not in a relationship. But again, these things happen, and I just advocate more so for that type of situation than having the courts just intervene.
Okay, so a couple of the men brought up some good points. Actually, this is a point, El Ghost brought up a point that I have not heard a lot of people talking about. And that is that law that allows women to leave their children at a fire station or a hospital without repercussion.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
for the first time, El Ghost, thank you so much, because for the first time ever, and maybe this is because I'm not a man, I just realized how jacked up that law is to fathers. Oh my gosh, can you freaking
Hello.
imagine? I would go insane if somebody took my child and just left them somewhere and I just didn't even have a say so in that. That is
This
a
is what I'm
crazy
saying. This
law.
is exactly what I'm saying.
Okay,
Let's
but
put notes
that's
in there.
actually okay. Yes, Elgos, that's a good one. I can't lie. That is a trifling law. That really, I can't even. I have no, I have nothing there. You're absolutely. That's. I never thought of that, but that is pretty crazy. That is insane. How many fathers have lost their child because of that law? That's what I would want to know.
But see, just think about this, right? And I've shared this, and just hear the narrative, right? And how pathological it'll become, right? So let's say, the two of them, decided to have the baby, right? But the father knows that, hey, this woman that I've laid down with and everything, she's really not stable. So okay, they have the baby and everything, and let's say the father jettisons away with the child. Of course, Amber Alerts are out everywhere. The situation is totally turned on its face, right? But again, that's because of what the brother alluded to. That mom could do that. That father cannot do that. Even though if he's for the best interest of the child, he's going to be pathologized.
Ask a Classy Black Man put a link in the chat to support his assertion that women can go through with an adoption without the father's consent. But you know what? I did look at that link, and that link pretty much said the same thing I said, and it actually had something else interesting in there that I think men should know about, which is that you can't really do it without the father's consent per se, unless you blatantly lie and say you don't know who the father is, which would be pretty trite. Otherwise, you have to attempt to get the father's
You don't
consent.
think it's some tribes of women out there? Come on, Iris.
No, I'm saying like definitely, but I'm saying for sure. And maybe now, and I do think that's an unfair law too, because it does leave it open, but for women to lie about that. But then the other exceptions were if the father was abusive, and you go to the authorities and petition the court for it. And then another thing is, apparently, I did not know this, but some states have a registry where men, you can keep track. They will register all the women you've had sex with, and then if any of them tries to pull some slick stuff, like, you'll be notified because their name will be in a database. That's crazy. I don't know if I would want to do that, but that's like when you are serious about. But this is why I say, like, you have to guard your bodies, right? Because at the end of the day, like, you shouldn't need a registry. Like, that's why we shouldn't have sex with people if we truly, truly don't want to risk procreation with them. Because, like, anything can happen. And honestly, men are more vulnerable in that situation. There's no
Yeah.
way to level that playing field.
Well, I'm just glad, you, hopefully other women are listening to it again. And I'm not talking about equality. I'm just talking about, what's equitable. And it's just like, okay, here are some of these laws, and really like, oh, there's no way a man could, perceive anything but pathological in that sense. You know, like I alluded to the one where, okay, both individuals are intoxicated and everything, but they end up, having a relationship, right? They end up having a sexual relationship encounter that evening. Well, the man had to rape her. You know what I mean? It's like, because again, that's the vulnerability. Again, because he's the man.
But drunk sex doesn't always equal rape. And I feel like the fear of being,
I agree with that, but I'm saying that's how it's often worded.
but I don't think that often is true, because let's keep it like, let's have a
Especially on
conversation.
colleges, that's, yeah.
Well, let's have an honest conversation. Most men, when women report rape, are never arrested or charged, right? And of the percentage that are arrested or charged, which is very small, there are very few convictions. So be they fake charges or real charges, when rape comes on the table, the conviction rate is extremely low, like under 10% low.
Okay, so
So I think it's almost an irrational sort of fear that
well,
men have.
not necessarily irrational sort of fear. If you're the man, so take me for example. If there's even the notion or the allegations of me raping a woman, my career is over, especially as a black man. So again, I'm not dampening the conviction rate or anything like that, but the allegations could be just as harmful. I mean, that's a real reality. No one wants to want to touch you. Like, oh yeah, I heard he raped such and such. I mean, let's take Nate Parker for example. So Nate Parker, when he did the Birth of a Nation, um, the re-allegations of his rape resurfaced. Right? They came up again, even though he was acquitted, but it came up again, and everybody's saying, "Oh yeah, he raped his white woman and everything, so on and so forth." And that was over like 6 years ago. So again, even though he had been in other movies and everything, these things never die. These allegations again, and after in the Birth of a Nation, and these allegations came out, they resurfaced again. I haven't seen them in another movie. So whether you convicted or not, they still have, they still have implications, and sometimes, especially for black males, they're grave implications.
That's funny. Somebody in the chat was saying that about black male, and I was literally typing that you think that, and then you said it. Yes, he's actually made this point to me before, that even if the conviction rate is low on the whole, for black men, the conviction rate is very high because they're more likely to convict a black man of rape, especially if the victim is that's making the claim is not black.
Yeah, but like I said, beyond the convictions, it's just the narrative. And that narrative is so reified within, I mean, it's woven within our society, the myth of the black rapist. I mean, it's just there. When you look at, the movie of Birth of a Nation, the original Birth of a Nation, right? The 1915 D.W. Griffin's, book, the propaganda piece, for the KKK membership, that's that's reified there. So again, we were just looking at, when they see us. I mean, so it's just so easy to throw this at, you know, black males, brown males to say that they rape, especially raped a white woman. And again, whether the conviction is there or not, again, the damage is done.
That's true. That's true. I think, when it comes to rape, right? And just thinking about the vulnerability men have with regard to rape. This is what I will say is that the position of men is just difficult because you guys are the least vulnerable people among the men, women, and children. Like, because that's all the people that are on the earth are men, women, and children. There's no other kinds of people. Children are the most vulnerable. Women are more vulnerable than men, and men are the least vulnerable. And I think a lot of the kind of short ends of the stick that you guys are getting is not for any reason except for that the society is built to protect the most vulnerable people. And so by way of not being in the most vulnerable classes, you're not more vulnerable than children and you're not more vulnerable than women because you guys are typically larger, stronger, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? That's why you guys are the protectors of society, right? You guys are most equipped for that job. Then it follows that men have created, now these are laws that men have created, right?
Absolutely.
Men have,
Absolutely.
right, they've created
Yes.
these laws to correct the bad behavior in other men. And
Yes.
so I think that's one of the things. I mean, in all honesty, you guys still have an amazing amount of power. I mean, most people in power are male. So I think a lot of these things, I mean, women and feminists, they're running their mouths and yapping their jaws. But, well, I should say, but white men are in power, right? So
Yes.
there we go.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right. Right.
But, as I was listening to you talking about, kind of like the hierarchy of vulnerability, right? But I would wholeheartedly agree with you. Especially when we talk about black males, there's a level of vulnerability there. But when we're talking about children in particular, I'm getting very concerned, and I know this is something that we've talked about. Um, I recently posted something on Facebook. This not the story that I posted about pedophilia that's being. I shared that with you, and I think you shared it with your audience. That's being taught, within several curricula, um, and then some school districts in California, right? But so the NAMBLA and there's another organization. They're really pushing this sick, sinister notion that adult sex with a child is not criminal. I mean, this is really something that is very dangerous and problematic, and it's really being pushed within our society. And so when you have, you know, the what do they call them? They're not the cross dressers come in and read it in the libraries. And I just conveyed to you one was twerking and everything.
Oh yeah, I showed that when I did it last night. But y'all, that video is still not up. My commentary on the epidemic of twerking.
So when you have the drag queens, so we have these drag queens, reading library books of the queens. And again, I know I'm not making the correlations, although Irene may. I'm not making the correlation with drag queens and pedophilia, but I'm really trying to see why has this been such a popular notion of having, drag queens come and reading in, public libraries to really young children, you know, and again, and I'm not making that correlation, But I said this, and Irene definitely disagrees with me. But I think, you know, people within the LGBTQX
Why
plus,
the elemental P?
yeah, yeah. But I don't want to add element. I don't want to add too many letters because some people want to add that P onto there for pedophilia, and that's really problematic. Um, Again, your orientation that's you. That's my positionality on it. But again, pedophilia is not prideful. I mean, that's not pride. That's crime. And the extension of this, or the attempt to extend this within that community, I think people in that community needs to be up in arms about that. But again, if they're not, then that's going to, yeah, then we're going to have a problem. So when we're talking about the vulnerability of children, to me, with this current, proliferation of, the drag queen and the this being instilled within the curriculum, it's going to be a very dangerous time for the babies when they're in, the traditional school setting.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I definitely agree with that. But see, the thing is that our children don't belong in these schools anyway, you guys. Like, I think it's essential to note that. Like, our children don't belong in these schools. And so we have to work really hard to do what we can do to like pull them out of those environments. I think like that is absolutely essential. It can't be overstated, especially in this day and age. And I feel like as Black people, we don't know how much power we have even to check the district, because over in Europe, out of all places, where they have the highest rate of pedophilia, when they tried to teach homosexuality in the schools in one place, parents pulled their kids out by the hundreds. So they had to cancel the class because the parents refused to bring their kids to school. And I think, we can be more proactive, like as a community, with regard to those things. So, with that said, I guess we'll close it out here. I guess the moral of today's story is you just watched a conversation between a submissive woman and her man where we did not agree, because there's a difference between submission and being a pick me. So I think, this is actually a great example of a conversation of submission where you're not being a pick me. I didn't agree with every last word that came out of his mouth. He didn't assert his manhood by yelling me down or disrespecting me. And we were able to engage in a conversation, and I'm still going to be in with y'all when we hang up. He's still going to be in charge. You know what I mean? He was in charge during this conversation. He's going to be in charge when the conversation ends. But again, pick-me's are useful and submissive women are valuable, right? So you want to be submissive and be valuable. You don't want to be something that is simply usable, lest you be used up and tossed into the trash. And for those of you guys who missed our conversation on submissive versus pick me, I really encourage you just to rewind this live back and listen to that, because I think, that was a good discussion, especially even discussing male pick me's and stuff like that. So thank you, babe, for doing this. Because like I said, we were watching, what were we watching, babe?
When they see us.
Oh, yeah. We were on the second episode, and I was like, oh, babe, I want to go live. And he's been waiting to see this. And so, the computers were flipped from watching that to talking to you guys. So, yeah, because it's hard for me, y'all. It's so hard for me to sit through like that much programming. Like, my mind started to check out. I'm not good with passive experiences, and I try not to talk too much because he tries to share like movies and stuff with me, because before him I really didn't watch that kind of stuff. So he's always showing me old movies because I've never seen anything before. but I needed a break. I needed some interaction. So if he's still up for it, we'll finish watching that. But thank you, baby. I really appreciate you doing this with me.
Hmm.
And everybody was like, that you're red pilled. Oh, Dark Prophet said that. I don't know what that means, but I think they mean like you agree with some of their talking points. He agrees with some of your talking points, but here's the thing, he's a really, really wonderful man still, right? So I think that there has to be a balance, right? And I would like to think I'm a very balanced person. I don't lean too far in one direction or the other. And I would like to think that you compliment me or I compliment you, babe, and that you're very balanced as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's what's up. Oh, hey, O'Shea. Oh, babe, O'Shea's in the chat too. Hi, O'Shea, but you're late because we're leaving now. So, yeah, we're going to get out of here and we will talk to you guys later.